Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly, and to the close of Book 3. I am Pemberton. This is Part 17. With Joppa fallen and Josephus a captive, Vespasian turns to mop up the rest of Galilee. The pirate-haunted port of Joppa is taken and its fleet destroyed. Tiberias, divided against itself, throws open its gates rather than be stormed, and Taricheae, on the shore of the great lake, is carried by Titus in a daring assault. Then comes the grim finish. The rebels who fled onto the water in their little boats are hunted down by the Romans on rafts, and the Sea of Galilee runs red in a rout that leaves the lake choked with the dead. Let us finish the book.
Vespasian returned to Ptolemais on the 4th day of the month Pamus, or Tammuz, and from there came to Caesarea, which lay by the seaside. This was a very great city of Judea, inhabited for the most part by Greeks. The citizens received both the Roman army and its general with every kind of acclamation and rejoicing. They did this partly from goodwill toward the Romans, but chiefly from hatred of those whom the Romans had conquered. For this reason they came in crowds, crying out against Josephus and demanding that he be put to death. But Vespasian passed over this petition about him in silence, treating it as the request of an unthinking multitude. He placed 2 of the legions at Caesarea, so that they could take their winter quarters there, since he saw that the city was very suitable for that purpose. But he placed the 10th and 5th legions at Scythopolis, so that he would not burden Caesarea with the whole army. That place was warm even in winter, just as it was suffocatingly hot in summer, because of its position in a plain near the Sea of Galilee. Meanwhile, a large number of people gathered together, both those who had seditiously escaped from among their enemies, and those who had escaped from the demolished cities. They repaired Joppa, which Cestius had left desolate, so that it might serve them as a place of refuge. Because the adjoining region had been laid waste in the war and could not support them, they decided to go out to sea. They built for themselves many piratical ships, turned pirates on the seas near Syria, Phoenicia, and Egypt, and made those seas unnavigable for everyone. As soon as Vespasian learned of their conspiracy, he sent both foot soldiers and horsemen to Joppa, which was unguarded at night. Those inside perceived that they were about to be attacked and were afraid, but they did not try to keep the Romans out. Instead, they fled to their ships and lay at sea all night, beyond the reach of Roman darts. Joppa is not naturally a harbor. It ends in a rough shore, straight for most of its length, but with 2 ends that bend toward each other. There are deep precipices there and great stones jutting out into the sea, where the chains with which Andromeda was bound have left their traces, bearing witness to the antiquity of that fable. But the north wind opposes the shore and beats upon it, dashing mighty waves against the rocks that receive them, and making the harbor more dangerous than the country the people had deserted. While the people of Joppa were floating about on the sea, a violent wind fell upon them in the morning. Those who sail there call it the Black North Wind. It dashed their ships against one another, drove some against the rocks, and carried many by force into the open sea as they struggled against the opposing waves. The shore was so rocky, and so many enemies were on it, that they were afraid to come to land. The waves rose so high that they drowned them. There was no place to which they could flee, and no way to save themselves, for if they stayed where they were, the violence of the wind thrust them out of the sea, and if they tried the city, the violence of the Romans thrust them out from there. There was much lamentation when the ships were dashed against one another, and a terrible noise when they were broken to pieces. Some of the multitude in them were covered by the waves and perished, and many were trapped amid shipwrecks. Some thought it easier to die by their own swords than by the sea, and so killed themselves before they were drowned. But the greater part were carried by the waves and dashed to pieces against the abrupt rocks, so that the sea was bloody for a long distance, and the parts near the shore were full of dead bodies. The Romans came upon those who were carried to shore and destroyed them. The number of bodies thrown out of the sea was 4,200. The Romans also took the city without opposition and completely demolished it. Thus Joppa was taken twice by the Romans in a short time. To prevent these pirates from coming there again, Vespasian erected a camp where the citadel of Joppa had stood and left a body of horsemen there with a few foot soldiers. The foot soldiers were to stay and guard the camp, while the horsemen were to spoil the surrounding country and destroy the neighboring villages and smaller cities. These troops overran the country as they had been ordered, and every day cut it to pieces and laid the whole region desolate. When the fate of Joppa was reported at Jerusalem, many at first disbelieved it because of the greatness of the calamity, and because there was no eyewitness to confirm the truth of what was said. Not one person had been safe to carry the news, but a rumor spread at random that the city had been taken, as such rumors usually spread bad news. In time, however, the truth became known from the places near Joppa, and it appeared to everyone to be all too true. Yet false stories were added to what had actually happened, for it was reported that Josephus had been killed when the city was taken. This news filled Jerusalem with sorrow. In every house, and among all who were connected with any of the slain, there was lamentation for them. But the mourning for the commander was public. Some mourned for those who had lived with them, others for their kindred, others for their friends, and others for their brothers, but all mourned for Josephus. The lamentation did not cease in the city before the 30th day, and many hired mourners with pipes were brought in to begin the mournful songs for them. As the truth came out in time, it appeared how the affairs of Joppa really stood. It was also found that the death of Josephus was a fiction. When they learned that he was alive, that he was among the Romans, and that the commanders treated him very differently from other captives, they became as violently angry at him now as they had previously shown goodwill when he seemed to be dead. Some abused him as a coward, others as a deserter, and the city was full of indignation at him and reproaches cast upon him. Their rage was aggravated by their afflictions, and inflamed still more by their failures. What usually becomes a reason for caution among wise men, namely affliction, became for them a spur to risk still further calamities, so that the end of one misery became the beginning of another. They therefore resolved to fall on the Romans more fiercely, as if by revenging themselves on the Romans, they would also take revenge on Josephus. This was the condition of Jerusalem in the troubles that now came upon it. Vespasian next wished to see the kingdom of Agrippa, while the king persuaded him to do so, partly so that he might entertain the general and his army in the best and most splendid manner his private means allowed, and partly so that, by their help, he might correct whatever was wrong in his government. Vespasian left the Caesarea by the seaside, and went to the place called Caesarea Philippi. There he refreshed his army for 20 days, and he himself was feasted by King Agrippa. There also he returned public thanks to God for the success he had had in his undertakings. But as soon as he was informed that Tiberias was fond of innovations, and that Taricheae had revolted, both cities being parts of Agrippa's kingdom, and since he was convinced that the Jews were everywhere turned aside from obedience to their governors, he thought it was the right time to make an expedition against these cities for Agrippa's sake, and to bring his cities back to reason. So he sent his son Titus away to the other Caesarea, so that he might bring the army stationed there to Scythopolis, the largest city of Decapolis, and near Tiberias. Vespasian came there, and waited for his son. Then he advanced with 3 legions, and pitched his camp 30 furlongs from Tiberias, at a station clearly visible to the innovators. It was named Cinebris. Vespasian also sent Valerian, a decurion, with 50 horsemen to speak peaceably to those in the city, and exhort them to give assurances of their fidelity. He had heard that the people desired peace, but were compelled by some of the seditious party to join with them and were forced to fight for them. When Valerian had marched up near the wall, he got down from his horse and made those with him do the same, so that they would not be thought to have come to skirmish. But before they could begin speaking with one another, the most powerful men among the seditious made an armed sally against them. Their leader was a man named Jesus, the son of Shapha, the chief head of a band of robbers. Valerian did not think it safe to fight contrary to the general's commands, even though he was sure of victory. He also knew it was very hazardous for a few men to fight many, for unprepared men to fight those who were ready, and he was surprised besides by this unexpected attack of the Jews. So he ran away on foot, as did 5 of the others in the same manner, leaving their horses behind. Jesus led these horses away into the city and rejoiced as though they had taken them in battle, rather than by treachery. The elders of the people and those of chief authority among them feared what the result of this matter would be, and fled to the Roman camp. They took their king with them, fell down before Vespasian to beg his favor, and entreated him not to overlook them or charge the madness of a few against the whole city. They asked him to spare a people who had always been civil and obliging to the Romans, and to bring the authors of this revolt to proper punishment. These men, they said, had watched them so closely that although they had long been eager to give the Romans the security of their right hands, they had not been able to do it. The general accepted these supplications, though he was very angry at the whole city because his horses had been carried off, because he saw that Agrippa was deeply concerned for them. So when Vespasian and Agrippa had accepted their right hands as security, Jesus and his party thought it unsafe to remain at Tiberias and fled to Taricheae. The next day Vespasian sent Trajan ahead with some horsemen to the citadel, to test whether the multitude were all disposed toward peace. As soon as he learned that the people were of the same mind as the petitioners, he took his army and went to the city. The citizens opened their gates to him, met him with cries of joy, and called him their savior and benefactor. But because the gates were so narrow, and the army took a long time getting through, Vespasian ordered the south wall to be broken down, and made a broad passage for their entrance. Still, to gratify the king, he charged them to abstain from plunder and injustice. For the king's sake he spared the rest of the wall, while the king undertook for them that they would remain faithful to the Romans in the future. In this way Vespasian restored the city to a quiet state after it had been grievously afflicted by sedition. Vespasian now pitched his camp between the city and Taricheae, but he fortified it more strongly because he suspected he would be forced to stay there and face a long war. All the innovators had gathered at Taricheae, relying on the strength of the city and on the lake beside it, which the people of the country call the Lake of Gennesareth. The city itself, like Tiberias, is situated at the foot of a mountain. On the sides not washed by the sea, it had been strongly fortified by Josephus, though not as strongly as Tiberias. The wall of Tiberias had been built at the beginning of the Jewish revolt, when Josephus had plenty of money and great power, but Taricheae had received only what remained of that liberality. Still, they had prepared a great number of ships on the lake, so that if they were beaten on land, they could retreat to them. The ships were also fitted out so that they could undertake a sea fight. While the Romans were building a wall around their camp, Jesus and his party were not frightened either by their number or by their good order, but made a sally against them. At the very first attack they scattered the builders of the wall and tore down the little that had already been built. But as soon as they saw the armed men gathering together, and before they themselves had suffered anything, they withdrew to their own men. The Romans then pursued them and drove them into their ships. There they launched out far enough to be able to reach the Romans with what they threw at them, then cast anchor, brought their ships close together as if in a line of battle, and from the sea fought the enemy who stood on land. When Vespasian heard that a great multitude of them had gathered in the plain before the city, he sent his son with 600 chosen horsemen to disperse them. My brave Romans, it is right for me, at the beginning of my speech, to remind you what nation you belong to, so that you may not be ignorant either of who you are or of who they are against whom we are going to fight. As for us Romans, no part of the inhabited earth has been able to escape our hands up to now. As for the Jews, though I will speak of them too, they have already been beaten, yet they do not give up the cause. It would be a sad thing for us to grow weak under good success, while they bear up under their misfortunes. I see the eagerness you show openly, and I rejoice in it. Yet, I am afraid that the multitude of the enemy may bring a hidden fear upon some of you. Let such a man consider again who we are who are to fight, and who they are against whom we are to fight. These Jews, though they are very bold and great despisers of death, are only a disorderly body and unskilled in war, and may be called a rout rather than an army. I need say nothing of our skill and our good order. This is the reason we Romans alone are trained for war in time of peace, so that when we fight our enemies we do not compare number with number. What advantage would we gain from our continual warfare if we still had to be equal in number to men who have not been used to war? Consider further that you are going to fight men who are in effect unarmed, while you are well armed, footmen, while you are horsemen, men who have no good general, while you have one. As these advantages make you in effect many times more than you are, so their disadvantages greatly diminish their number. It is not the multitude of men, even if they are soldiers, that makes wars successful, but their bravery, even if they are few. Few men are easily set in battle order and can easily assist one another, while armies that are too numerous are hurt more by themselves than by their enemies. The Jews are guided by boldness and rashness, the effects of madness. These passions indeed make a great show when they succeed, but are completely extinguished at the least failure. We are led by courage, obedience, and fortitude, which shows itself in good fortune and still does not abandon us in bad fortune. Indeed, your fighting has greater motives than those of the Jews. Though they risk war for liberty and for their country, what motive can be greater for us than glory, and that it may never be said that after we have gained dominion over the inhabited earth, the Jews are able to confront us? We must also reflect that there is no fear of suffering any incurable disaster in the present case, for many are ready to assist us and are near at hand. Yet it is in our power to seize this victory ourselves. I think we ought to prevent the arrival of those my father is sending to assist us, so that our success may belong especially to ourselves and bring us greater reputation. I cannot help thinking this is an opportunity in which my father, I, and you will all be put to the test, whether he is worthy of his former glorious achievements, whether I am truly his son, and whether you are truly my soldiers. It is usual for my father to conquer, and as for myself, I could not bear the thought of returning to him if I were once taken by the enemy. How will you avoid shame if you do not show equal courage with your commander when he goes before you into danger? You know very well that I will go into danger first and make the first attack on the enemy. Do not desert me, but persuade yourselves that God will assist my attack. Know this also before we begin, we shall now have better success than we would have if we fought at a distance. When Titus perceived that the enemy were very numerous, he sent to his father and informed him that he would need more forces. Yet he saw that many of the horsemen were eager to fight before any reinforcements could come, though some of them were secretly somewhat alarmed by the multitude of the Jews. He therefore stood in a place where he could be heard and addressed them. As Titus was speaking, an extraordinary fury fell upon the men. Trajan had already arrived before the fight began with 400 horsemen, and they were uneasy at this because the reputation of the victory would be diminished if shared by so many. Vespasian had also sent Antonius and Silo with 2,000 archers, charging them to seize the mountain opposite the city and repel those on the wall. The archers did as they were commanded and prevented those who tried to assist from that direction. Titus now made his own horsemen march first against the enemy, while the others followed him with a great noise. They stretched themselves across the plain as widely as the enemy who faced them, and by this means they appeared much more numerous than they really were. The Jews, though surprised by their attack in good order, resisted their assaults for a little while. But when they were pierced by the long poles and overwhelmed by the violent noise of the horsemen, they came to be trampled under their feet. Many were killed on every side, which made them scatter and run toward the city as fast as each was able. Titus pressed upon the hindmost and killed them. Of the rest, he attacked some as they stood in heaps, cut off others and met them in the face, and ran them through. He also leaped upon many as they fell upon one another, trod them down, cut off all their retreat to the wall, and turned them back into the plain, until at last by their multitude they forced a passage, escaped, and ran into the city. But now a terrible sedition broke out among them inside the city. The inhabitants themselves, who had possessions there, and to whom the city belonged, had not been disposed to fight from the beginning, and now they were even less willing because they had been beaten. But the foreigners, who were very numerous, tried to force them to fight all the more. There was therefore clamor and tumult among them, with everyone angry at one another. Titus was not far from the wall, and when he heard this tumult, he cried out to his soldiers, "Fellow soldiers, now is the time. Why do we delay when God is giving up the Jews to us? Take the victory that is given to you. Do you not hear what a noise they make? Those who escaped our hands are in uproar against one another. We have the city if we hurry. But besides haste, we must undergo some labor and use some courage, for no great thing is usually accomplished without danger. Accordingly, we must not only prevent them from uniting again, which necessity will soon compel them to do, but we must also prevent the arrival of our own men to assist us, so that, few as we are, we may conquer so great a multitude and take the city by ourselves alone." As soon as Titus had said this, he leaped onto his horse and rode quickly down to the lake. He marched along the lake, and was the first of them all to enter the city, with the others soon following him. Those on the walls were seized with terror at the boldness of the attempt, and no one dared to venture to fight him or hinder him. They abandoned the defense of the city. Some of those around Jesus fled across the country, while others ran down to the lake and met the enemy face to face. Some were killed as they were getting up into the ships, and others as they tried to overtake those already gone aboard. There was also great slaughter in the city, while the foreigners who had not already fled made resistance. But the native inhabitants were killed without fighting, in the hope that Titus would give them his right hand as security, and because they were conscious that they had not consented to the war, they avoided fighting. After Titus had killed the authors of the revolt, he stopped any further slaughter out of compassion for these inhabitants of the place. But those who had fled to the lake, seeing the city taken, sailed as far from the enemy as they possibly could. Titus then sent one of his horsemen to his father to tell him the good news of what he had done. Vespasian was naturally very joyful, both because of the courage and the glorious actions of his son, and because he thought that now the greatest part of the war was over. He then came there himself, set men to guard the city, and ordered them to take care that nobody got out of it secretly, but to kill anyone who attempted to do so. On the next day he went down to the lake and commanded that vessels be fitted out to pursue those who had escaped in the ships. These vessels were quickly prepared, because there was a great supply of materials and also a great number of craftsmen. This lake of Gennesareth is named from the country next to it. Its breadth is 40 furlongs, and its length 140. Its waters are sweet and very pleasant to drink, for they are finer than the thick waters of other marshy lakes. The lake is also pure, and on every side it ends directly at the shores and the sand. When drawn up, its water is temperate and gentler than river or spring water, yet always cooler than one would expect in so wide a place. When this water is kept in the open air, it becomes as cold as the snow that the people of the country are accustomed to make by night in summer. There are several kinds of fish in it, different in both taste and appearance from those found elsewhere. It is divided into two parts by the river Jordan. Panium is thought to be the fountain of Jordan, but in reality the river is carried there in a hidden way from the place called Phiala. This place lies on the way up to Trachonitis, 120 furlongs from Caesarea, not far off the road on the right hand. It is rightly named Phiala, or vial or bowl, because of the roundness of its circumference being round like a wheel. Its water always remains up to its edges, neither sinking nor overflowing. This origin of Jordan was formerly unknown, but it was discovered when Philip was tetrarch of Trachonitis. He had chaff thrown into Phiala, and it was found at Panium, where the ancients had thought the fountainhead of the river was, having been carried there by the waters. As for Panium itself, its natural beauty had been improved by the royal generosity of Agrippa and adorned at his expense. From this cavern the visible stream of Jordan rises and divides the marshes and fens of the lake Semechonitis. After running another 120 furlongs, it first passes by the city Julias, then passes through the middle of the lake Gennesareth. After that it runs a long way through a desert, and then empties into the lake Asphaltites. Country lying opposite this lake also has the same name, Gennesareth. Its nature is wonderful, and so is its beauty. Its soil is so fruitful that every kind of tree can grow upon it, and the inhabitants accordingly plant all kinds of trees there. The temper of the air is so well mixed that it suits these different kinds very well. Walnuts, which require the coldest air, flourish there in great abundance. There are also palm trees, which grow best in hot air, and fig trees and olives grow near them, though these require more temperate air. One may call this place the ambition of nature, where it forces plants that are naturally enemies to one another to agree together. It is a happy contest of the seasons, as if each of them laid claim to this country. It not only nourishes different kinds of autumn fruit beyond expectation, but also preserves them for a long time. It supplies men with the principal fruits, grapes and figs, continually for 10 months of the year, and the other fruits as they ripen together throughout the whole year. Besides the good temperature of the air, it is also watered by a very fertile fountain. The people of the country call it Capharnaum. Some have thought it to be a vein of the Nile, because it produces the Coruscant fish, as does the lake near Alexandria. The length of this country extends along the banks of the lake that bears the same name for 30 furlongs, and its breadth is 20. This is the nature of that place. When the vessels were ready, Vespasian put on board as many of his forces as he thought sufficient to overpower those on the lake, and set sail after them. Those who had been driven on to the lake could neither flee to the land, where everything was in the hands of their enemies and at war against them, nor fight on equal terms at sea. Their ships were small and fitted only for piracy. They were too weak to fight against Vespasian's vessels, and the sailors in them were so few that they were afraid to come near the Romans, who attacked them in great numbers. Nevertheless, as they sailed around the vessels, sometimes coming near, they threw stones at the Romans from a good distance, or came closer and fought them. In both cases they suffered the greater harm themselves. The stones they threw at the Romans only made a sound one after another, because they struck men in armor, while the Roman darts could reach the Jews themselves. When they dared to come near the Romans, they suffered before they could do any harm to the other side, and were drowned together with their ships. As for those who tried to come to an actual fight, the Romans ran many of them through with their long poles. Sometimes the Romans leaped into their ships with swords in their hands and killed them. When some of the ships met the Roman vessels, the Romans caught them in the middle and destroyed at once both the ships and the men taken in them. As for those drowning in the sea, if they lifted their heads above the water, they were either killed by darts or caught by the vessels. If in their desperate condition they tried to swim toward their enemies, the Romans cut off either their heads or their hands. Indeed, they were destroyed everywhere in various ways, until the rest were put to flight and forced to get onto the land while the vessels surrounded them on the sea. But many of these were driven back as they tried to get ashore and were killed by darts on the lake, while the Romans leaped out of their vessels and destroyed many more on land. One could then see the lake all bloody and full of dead bodies, for not one of them escaped. In the following days there was a terrible stink, and a very sad sight over that country. The shores were full of shipwrecks and swollen dead bodies. As the corpses were heated by the sun and putrefied, they corrupted the air, so that the misery became an object of pity not only to the Jews, but even to those who hated them and had caused that misery. This was the result of the sea fight. The number of those killed, including those who had been killed before in the city, was 6,500. After this fight was over, Vespasian sat on his tribunal at Taricheae in order to distinguish the foreigners from the old inhabitants, since the foreigners appeared to have begun the war. He deliberated with the other commanders about whether he ought to save those old inhabitants or not. The commanders argued that releasing them would be to his own disadvantage, because once set free they would not remain quiet. Since they would be people without proper homes, they would be able to compel those to whom they fled to fight against the Romans. Vespasian acknowledged that they did not deserve to be saved, and that if they were given permission to flee, they would use it against those who gave them that permission. Still, he considered with himself in what manner they should be killed. If he had them killed there, he suspected that the people of the country would become his enemies, for they would certainly never endure the killing of so many people who had come to him as supplicants. And he himself could not bear to offer violence to them after giving them assurances of their lives. However, his friends were too strong for him. They claimed that nothing done against Jews could be impiety, and that he ought to prefer what was profitable over what was fitting when both could not be made consistent. So he gave them an ambiguous liberty to do as they advised, and allowed the prisoners to go by no road except the one that led to Tiberias. The prisoners readily believed what they wished to be true, and went securely along the permitted road with their possessions. Meanwhile the Romans seized all the road that led to Tiberias, so that none of them could leave it, and shut them up in the city. Then Vespasian came and ordered them all to stand in the stadium. He commanded that the old men, together with the others who were useless, be killed. These numbered 1,200. From the young men he selected 6,000 of the strongest and sent them to Nero to dig through the isthmus. The remainder, 30,400, he sold as slaves, besides those whom he made a present to Agrippa. As for those who belonged to Agrippa's kingdom, he gave the king permission to do with them as he pleased. However, the king sold these also as slaves. As for the rest of the multitude, who were Trachonites, Gaulonites, people of Hippos, and some of Gadara, the greater part were seditious persons and fugitives of such shameful character that they preferred war to peace. These prisoners were taken on the 8th day of the month Gorpius, or Elul.
And the book 3 ends, with Galilee broken, its towns taken one by one, and the rebellion driven south toward the one prize that still matters, Jerusalem. But the road to the holy city runs through a city already tearing itself apart from within. In Book 4, the zealots seize the temple, the factions turn their knives on their own people, and a reign of terror grips Jerusalem long before the Romans ever arrive. Thank you for sitting with the whole of Book 3. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.